Hello, everyone. Hello, dear friends, and welcome to our last educational session of Africa Esports series Season 1. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here and to close in this ceremony, to close in our series. And we have a great speaker today, Jason Chung. Jason Chung he's an executive director of esports and assistant professor of sports management in the University of New Haven. I'm sorry, just a sec. Hello, everyone. And he will be speaking today in our last session about international perspective of on esports. Jason, please, the floor is yours. You have the honor and to be our last but not the least speaker of this season 1.
Well,
thank you very
Well, thank you very much for the invitation, and it's a pleasure as always to be here. As you said, Ignat, I'm executive director of esports at the University of New Haven, and I teach there as well as assistant professor. We're building out the esports education in the United States at both the bachelor's level and the master's level. In my spare time, but I'm also counsel at a law firm by the name of Zuber Lawler, where I also give legal advice on esports matters, which is a bunch of different topics, as you could imagine, right? Everything from contracts all the way to disputes and that kind of stuff, right? So it's been that's why I enjoy getting the chance to speak with the next generation, because there's a lot that's happening in esports, and there's a lot that's going to be built out by this generation. So look forward to connecting, and look forward to speaking with you here as well. So I have a presentation here for you, and I wanted to go over a few things today. And I have a few goals today. And the first goal is to understand the context and history of esports and entertainment and video games. Consider the nature of what makes competitive gaming and esports special, and examine the role of sponsors and infrastructure in the expansion of esports. And this kind of follows in with what I've been saying over the past few weeks, that infrastructure is really important. And internationally, in terms of the perspectives that people have on esports, it's really framed by what's already available and what could be available in terms of driving business growth and also audience growth in these countries, right? So to move on. All right, so first let's talk about how people traditionally make money in video games, right? There are traditionally, if you take a look at this graphic over here, people spend a lot of money making video games by creating kind of a studio structure, right? And then publishers basically distribute the games, and they produce games that are, obviously esports and competitive in nature, but also, big games like AAA titles where, they have narratives, they have movie scores, they have stories, all that kind of stuff. And some of the games like that are like Fallout, GTA 5, The Last of Us, and you also have a bunch of indie games as well, very great games that are kind of being developed by an army of people and hitting the marketplace. In the United States, to give you an example of the scale of the industry here, you have about 2,800 video game locations in the US. 2,300 of those are development. You have about 500 publishing companies, and over 65,000 workers are directly employed in the video game industry. And the US video game industry adds about $11.7 billion a year to the GDP here in the United States, right? And that's at an average salary a couple of years ago of nearly $100,000 US a year, right? So it's a pretty big industry with a lot of technical workers, a lot of people with expertise in the industry. And that's why in the United States, you're getting a big push, right? Mainly because the marketplace is there, but so is the expertise, right? And people always ask me, try to explain to me, Jason, what the video game ecosystem and the development system looks like in the United States. Does it resemble another industry? And it's a question that I've had, for multiple years. And I've been thinking about it, and I said, well, it looks most to me like Hollywood, right? If you look at filmmaking, it's a pretty traditional structure, and it replicates that of esports. You have a production studio, or you have a studio that actually produces everything, right? That makes everything. And then you have a distribution partner that really, basically finances everything and also makes sure that everything goes out to the right proper channels so that you can get maximum number of audience to go see the movie or play the video game, right? And so that has implications in terms of the structure. The structure up till now has been a very, because entertainment likes to ape each other, if from the 90s to the 2000s, that's the kind of way that things were made. Video games were handled within the industry, right? There would be developers that produce it, and there would be people on the distribution side that would distribute it to retailers like GameStop, and that's how you would buy it. But obviously things have changed, right? Esports titles have changed how people, purchase video games. Everything has changed in terms of how people download and actually get video games onto their computers or onto their consoles as well. There's been a rapid sea change because of a few things. So if we look at esports specifically, right? Esports being the competitive video game side of things. Esports is not just video games, right? Esports is not just one product either, right? Esports is what I'd like to call an interactive communications experience. And I'm not gonna play this video for you, but what do I mean by interactive communications experience? Well, esports is not kind of like what a AAA title is in the United States. It's not like a GTA 5 where you just play the game, it's over. Maybe you play the online component, maybe you don't, but you could finish a narrative story. It's not like that. It's kind of like a sport in the sense that you always need to communicate with people in order to play the game. You need to talk with your teammates. You have to play with them. You have to strategize with them. So there's a lot that goes on in terms of just on the playing field. You need to sort of work together, but also there's a whole massive infrastructure behind it in terms of telecoms, in terms of publishers and everything like that have to work together to deliver you that product in your home, right? And going into that the big word that I go in here is interactivity, right? Esports is part of an interactive system, it's basically that infrastructure that creates the critical vehicle that you need for esports, and for esports to also be profitable, right? And internet is the backbone of that, right? Without the internet, you don't have any interactivity. So that's why telecommunications and infrastructure is so important for esports, because while you could play GTA 5 locally, you can't do the same with League of Legends, right? You could probably do some training missions and stuff, but what makes that game is that interactivity. So if you don't have the infrastructure or telecommunications or things like that, there's nothing really you can do, right? And so esports is much more bound to the broader sort of internet and telecommunication structure and infrastructure than a traditional video game would be, right? And the internet is also important because not only do you need it to work, the internet acts as the conduit for revenue as well, increasingly on the video game side, but especially on the esports competitive video gaming side, right? And why is this? Well, it's because it enables cooperative and competitive gameplay. It changes the retail environment, right? I was talking to you about GameStop here in the United States. In Canada, that would be EB Games. I think in the UK would also be EB Games. But all these traditional brick and mortar retailers, they're suffering in terms of revenues because you can just download the game these days, right? And you can download directly from, a distribution platform of your choice. So that changes the economics and the scale of what you can do in terms of video games. The internet also changes how games can be monetized, right? When people played Super Mario and you bought the cartridge back in the 80s, that was it. That was your whole experience. If there was a bug in the game or there was a flaw in the game, too bad. That's just the way it was. These days, when you're looking at, Fortnite, for instance, Fortnite monetizes its game extremely well, right? By adding skins and different features and all that kind of stuff as they go. So definitely that's a conduit for money as well. The internet is also critical to esports and video games as well, but esports in particular, because it allows for a new broadcasting method, right? The internet allows companies like Twitch to basically broadcast, the sport to people across the world, and that's an advantage that to not have to rely on linear TV to do that, right? And the internet also allows you to find the people that you play with and also engineer that community, because at the end of the day, the community is really what's going to keep a title relevant for over a long time. The reason why Smite didn't make it, but League of Legends did, or CS:GO did, isn't just because one game is better than another. Technically, Smite might have been better, but it's that community that keeps people coming back, and that interactivity among that community that keeps people coming back, right? So, look, the main point that I'm trying to make is that the internet has allowed not video games, but esports to exist at all, right? So if you look at how multiplayer was done in the old days, this is how it was done. I don't know if anyone here remembers what LAN parties were, but local area, local access, local parties, in order to play video games against each other, you needed to basically take wires, plug them into each other's computers, bring huge monitors down with you, usually into somebody's basement, and then you could play sort of multiplayer games. So, nowadays you don't have to do that. If you can just go on your phone and you can just connect through a wireless connection and have a great game with somebody halfway across the world with no problem. But in the old days, this is what it looked like to really do multiplayer gaming, right? These days, like I was saying, you have an online open world, right? When you're playing something like a Fortnite, you're jumping down, the guy next to you on that plane could be anywhere in the world, right? Usually in a server, they try to group you together, but at the same time, if that person wants to join a different server and communicate with people from other regions, they can. So that opens up literally the entire world through the telecommunications experience, right? In terms of sales, I wanted to illustrate not just, I didn't want to just tell you how the revenue and how distribution of games have changed. I wanted to actually show you. So if you look at this, graph, you'll see that in 2009, as recently as 2009, which is just 12 years ago, 80% of game sales were done in person, right? So you need to go to a retail store, you need to give the cashier money, and you can walk out with a game that you can put in your console or PC or something like that. By 2017, which is already 4 years ago now, right? So this is a long time ago. 80%, that number flipped basically, and basically 80% of people would buy things online and just download it instead. So the internet has really changed that economic infrastructure, and that's pretty much what's happened in the United States. Now, every region is different. In Europe, I think the number might be a bit higher. In Asia, it might be higher. In other places, it might be lower. But really, at the end of the day, whatever you think, as soon as the telecommunications experience got better and you started getting more and more active broadband internet, the way that people have bought things has changed, right? It's gone from a brick and mortar experience to online. And that's true for a lot of products. If you think about Amazon and physical products here, that's how sales have gone here for physical things as well. But definitely for video games and digital products, everything has gone online, right? If you also look at the development of the online ecosystem, and interactivity, you're also looking at new ways to add value after the game purchase all the time. And I think I mentioned this with add-ons at Fortnite. And this is a good example, right? Look at the different ways they're charging you, and look, they've even created their own currency system with V-Bucks in Fortnite, so that you can buy different assets to put in there, right? And that's great for them because they can localize currencies and costs for local regions, right? And then if you by charging V-Bucks, they can also take that local currency question completely out of the thing, because they'll charge you what the local market can bear for that number of V-Bucks, right? So it's been a boon for online companies, because they can not only sell online, but they can also localize that cost structure for online sales as well, so that people can participate in their broader community as well, right? And then, of course, in terms of additional revenue, you've got in-game microtransaction subscriptions and in-game advertising. And each of these innovations came and helped defray a lot of the development costs, which are ballooning sort of worldwide, right? So that's why if you play a game these days, and especially let's say you play FIFA, you're going to see real life advertisers in there, and they're going to be charged for that, and because they want to get people across the world looking at their brand, right? And increasingly, you're seeing more and more localized ads through that sort of system, which has been a boon for the advertising industry. It's been a boon also for the video game industry, because making video games is expensive. So you want as many monetization channels as possible, right? Um, especially in terms of esports as well, the internet also allows fans to consume games differently. Like I said, you've got online broadcasting platforms, such as Twitch, also YouTube gaming to a certain degree, right? Um, you know, because you have a different experience, that means that people in Africa, for instance, can watch things in North America, right? Um, if you're a fan of, say, baseball or ice hockey here in North America, you might actually have more access to watch all the games than are available here, because linear TV rules means that especially when you're on TV, there's lots of contract language that actually blacks out games if they don't have sellouts in their local markets, right? Or so there's all these kinds of weird contractual clauses, which means that people sometimes can't see matches in their home markets, right? But you can, because you're remote, but you can watch it, you can leverage the internet to watch it in a much more dynamic way, right? So because of the internet, if you're talking about esports, right, the competitive aspect, you're gonna see that esports can be organized, played, sold, monetized, and broadcast, just like we said, right? And in fact, it's gotten so pervasive that because there's so much interactivity, game publishers and community managers and everything like that, they have to control things like community, social engineering, governance, make sure that everyone is obeying the rules and not hacking. There was that recent sort of video, not recent, a couple months ago, there was a video by Vicstar123 about Warzone, right? Call of Duty Warzone. And he said he's not going to play it anymore because there's too many people hacking and cheating and things like that. So it's not an enjoyable experience anymore. These are considerations that, there are good parts of interactivity and there are bad parts of interactivity. And if you're a video game publisher, regardless of where you are in the world, you have to keep in mind what that community is doing so that the game stays, enjoyable for all. What does this mean? What does this move towards interactivity mean? Well, there's a few things to look at, to be honest, right? In the United States, not now, but in recent years, there's been sort of a pitch battle about, access to the internet, right? Can companies privilege certain types of content over another? Or should they continue doing what they were doing, which was net neutrality, which is let all the information through and just let people, pick and choose whatever they want, and everything just comes to the pipe equally. That's been a very American sort of debate. In other countries such as Portugal, you do have a different regime where they do privilege certain types of content over others. And this is every country has their own method, but traditionally you have a lot of support for net neutrality for pro-internet people and gamers, because they know that means that you're not going to be charged another few bucks a month or exorbitant amount per month in order to do video gaming, keep your ping low enough to video game, right? So you have to think about these things when you're an engaged gamer, because if you don't have that sort of infrastructure or you don't have that ability to connect as quickly as others, you're not going to be competitive in those titles, right? And that might prevent you from being discovered as a talent, or even from playing with one another in a way that's compelling, right? One of the things to look at in terms of revenue is esports depends a lot on partnerships and brand activation, right? So even though we're talking about all these online things and all this infrastructure, one of the challenges that esports has to deal with going forward as the competitive gaming industry is that even now, between 60 and 75%, depends on who you talk to, all of their revenue depends on traditional brands, right? And brand activations. And yes, some of those brand activations may be online and all that kind of stuff, but they're still relying very heavily on dollars from traditional buyers and stuff like that in order to stay afloat. And there's this big sort of divide between endemic and non-endemic brands. It's closer to 50-50 now, but in previous years it was more endemic. And what do I mean by endemic sponsors, right? Non-endemic sponsors. Well, endemic sponsors are people who are, make sense or are logical people to be in the video game space or the esports space, right? They deliver products that help you play those games, right? So Alienware, AMD, NZXT, Astro, they make sense to advertise in the video game space. So they've been considered endemic in that space. And non-endemic is everyone else, like the Coca-Colas of the world, the BMWs, the Mercedes. Believe it or not, they've been actually investing very heavily in marketing as well here in North America, in Europe, and in Asia. And why is that? Why are non-endemic sponsors getting more involved in brand activations and sponsorship and advertising? It's because they want to get younger. You know, when you look at any sort of fandom, especially with the North American sports, right? The average age for fans of all four leagues is getting older and older and older. Baseball tends to be the oldest, then football. Basketball is the youngest, but that's still 40 plus, I believe, right? In terms of the average age. Esports is much younger, right? It's at least 10 years younger than that. So you know, so if you're let's say a corporate person and you want to advertise to somebody or a group that's going to be alive for a long time and might have disposable income, you're going to aim at people like that, like esports and gaming, just simply because they're going to be customers for longer. So that's the reason why sponsors are connected very well with esports. And obviously you have what I'd like to call the half endemic brands like, you know, Red Bull and Monster. They do pretty well I think worldwide, but primarily in North America and Europe. And they've been sponsoring esports events for a very, very long time, to the point where, you know, they're pretty much almost considered endemic at this point. And look, sponsors, I went over why sponsors care about all this stuff. They want to reach you. And how are they reaching you is the question, right? In the old days, they would have advertised heavily on TV. These days, you're probably seeing a lot more digital ads aimed at you. You're probably seeing a lot more sponsored segments in your favorite esports podcasts. And also, don't forget about the influencer economy, right? Influencers are everywhere, you know, on Instagram and Twitch and YouTube and all that kind of stuff. And they're using their privileged position in order to market to you, right? What their sponsors want them to do, right? So you have to, and all of these sort of channels for brands, they're basically leveraging these new online apps and tools and this online interactive economy to make you want to buy stuff, right? And that is the lifeblood of not just, you know, video gaming or esports, but of all business, basically, right? So look, the other question that I get is, what about physical tournaments then in this case, right? We have all these wonderful online tools. You know, what should tournament organizers continue doing this? Why should people bring real life events to places? Well, you know, the one thing I like to say is that we might have all this wonderful interactive, you know, stuff available to us, right? Especially in esports, you can organize remote matches and stuff like that. It's still not as good as in person, right? I think, you know, we've lived through a COVID world for a while now. And I think we kind of agree that as great as it is to catch up with your friends by Zoom and the ability to do all that, or just, you know, send them a text message, seeing them and meeting them and hanging out with them in person is the best thing, right? And if you're playing games, it's even doubly better because everything gets better, right? There's less lag, ping times are better. You know, you can see the other guy, right? So the competitive element is much more enhanced. All of these things are true, right? So as much as we talk about interactivity, as much as we talk about things improving with telecommunications, yes, that rise has allowed us for esports and gaming to reach a new level. But it also means that I also think that it correlates to people wanting to go to in-person places just as much, because you get the great flavor and you can compete whenever you want. And there's a convenience factor of being online and handling these things online. But when you get to, you know, actually go see the best and you know, compete against the best and be there with your fellow peers, there's nothing that beats that. And I think that's pretty much the ultimate form of interactivity anyway, right? And then, you know, obviously that's why you have a lot in terms of interactivity. You're also seeing people build physical spaces for that reason. So these are pictures I took at the esports arena in Las Vegas a few years ago. They're building physical structures because, yes, they'll have the top of line telecommunications equipment, they'll have fiber optic, all that kind of stuff. It will be a very high-tech place, but it's a high-tech place that allows you to interact in a very low-tech way. in person together. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, everything I've been talking about over the last few weeks is that fact that interactivity and infrastructure, they're the lifeblood of esports, but they're the lifeblood of esports because they allow you to be together and to work together and to compete together and to just hang out together and have a good time. And ultimately, that's what this industry is about, because it's the industry, it's the entertainment industry, and you need to be entertained in order for this industry to make sense at all. All right. Any questions? All right. Well, in that case, let me just see. A second. Okay, well then I've waited a little bit for some questions, but definitely, it seems like everybody understands the point. Internationally, I think all of these, just to wrap everything up, I think internationally, all these things are pretty much the same, right? In the sense that, yes, do different regions in the world have different sort of preferences about different games? Sure they do, right? But really the reason why the industry is growing, the reason why this interest in esports is exploding is because it allows for interaction and a community building in a different way, right? In a more organic and fun way. So that's basically what's keeping the industry growing and alive, right? And oh, here's a question. What about those who are trying to have better game material for gaming and have full potential? Yeah, okay. I think I'm trying to understand the question, Louis. So if you have if you want to reiterate, that's good. But I think what you mean is if you're looking to create better material for gaming and what needs to happen, I think quite frankly a lot of the things that can happen to make gaming and esports better is that there needs to be more diversity in the field, right? I think one of the things that everyone is finding, from video game designers to the people that commentate on these things, is that a lot of games tend to have a lot of derivative products, right? So you'll have a MOBA, there'll be another MOBA that looks like it, and so on and so forth. And if you're going to have a GTA, you're going to have a GTA clone, and so on and so forth. And that's because, quite frankly, people want to replicate success, but also coming up with a great idea is hard. And coming up with a great idea for a game or an esports title is doubly difficult when everybody comes from similar backgrounds or similar levels of education or similar parts of the world, right? And that's the reason why I'm glad to see so many great publishers and developers coming from all across the world, right? When Poland CD Projekt Red, is doing some great stuff with their narrative-based games. You're seeing great sort of MOBAs come out of Asia. You're seeing all kinds of different sort of development, and all of that is feeding into better material for gaming and esports as well, just simply because you need to have these new ideas and new influences coming from all over in order for the industry to be healthy. And that's the same also for all kinds of entertainment, by the way, right? Whether it comes to film or music, things have only gotten better as we get more and more global interaction, and we get more and more influences permeating our culture, right? And that can only be a good thing. And that's why I'm very excited to see many more developments from the African continent as well. I just think that there's going to be so many different ideas, titles, gameplay formats, all this kind of stuff coming out from Africa, and I'm looking forward to it as well. Okay, I'll wait another few seconds, but if not, I can also wrap up. And if you have any questions or anything like that, you can feel free to reach me anytime. You could reach me on my school email. It's jchung@newhaven.edu, right? So that's jchung@newhaven.edu. And or my Twitter handle is Chung Sports, CHUNG Sports, right? Oh, Louisa, one more question. But with the lack of funds because of background, like if gamers have potential or poor background, yeah, that is actually a huge problem. And that's not a problem localized to any part of the world. Access and equity is also an issue, right? All over, including here in the United States, right? Not everybody here has access to even a great computer. You know, people are accessing the internet through libraries, through other things. They're having to use a laptop given to them by the school or lent to them by the school. So it's difficult in those cases to really get going. But here's the thing: there's a lot of things that are happening in mobile, and one of the great things about the mobile phone industry is that prices are going down. And I understand that even globally, in other markets, you know, availability is quite high, and you wouldn't believe the amount of you would not believe the amount of places to learn how to code, stream, you know, play games, all that kind of stuff off your mobile phone, right? So if you have access to that, I would highly encourage you to actually really check out a whole bunch of different apps dedicated to learning how to do all these types of skills on your phone, right? And failing that, I would also push at the same time to ask either private companies or the government to pull resources to create, or what are, you know, community access points where you can access these kinds of machines or that you need to get online, right? I talked a few weeks ago about South Korea, and the reason why South Korea has so many things called PC bangs or PC rooms or net cafes, where you have you know, dozens and dozens of computers with high-speed internet lines where everybody can play games together and also go there to do a whole bunch of other activities. They have that because the government supported you know, private companies or private people in setting up these community access points for the internet a long time ago. Because of the financial crisis in the 1990s. And, you know, those community access points basically encouraged a lot of South Koreans to get online. And now South Korea is one of the most high-tech and connected countries in the world. So, you know, the government can help, private companies can help. And I think if you want to frame it in a certain way for those kinds of people about why should they pay, it costs so much, every dollar spent there is going to really come back in multiples in the future, right? Through an educated populace who's able to participate in the global information economy. That's what it's for. And it's not just about gaming, but gaming is the gateway to a lot of learning. And I think that's something that a lot of people, including businesses and governments, are very receptive to. So hopefully that answered your question, Luiso. Again, feel free to reach out to me if I haven't been able to talk to you on this stream. It's been a pleasure, and thank you very much.